This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Maybe cold up here, this northeastern parts, but it is definitely heating up quite nicely with the NBA All-Star Weekend on the precipice, and as well too NBA trade deadline. And that is where we will pivot our attention a little bit on some of the rumors that are circulating. You know us, man. We love to get all up in people's business when it comes to the NBA rumors. But let it not be said that if you ain't trying to make moves, then you ain't trying to win chips. So, we know that there's definitely some teams who surprisingly are in the playoff conversation, but they still know that in order to be among the elites, they're going to probably have to shake that roster up or shore that roster up to give themselves a formidable chance for them to make this run. So to discuss all things happening with trade rumors galore and a nice little segue, we got Who You Got, man. As always, the brainchild, the mastermind of all of the great topics we love to discuss, my man, Mr. Warrenshaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, my brother?
You know what it is, fam. We back up in here for end of January conversation, inching towards the infamous NBA trade deadline. So a lot of chatter coming out on that in that front, and then obviously, man, as you alluded to, bringing back one of our favorites, and I think our fans' favorites as well too this week. So just happy to be here as always. The NBA continues to rock and keep us going. So it's going to be another great show.
Absolutely, man. And there's quite a few players that we're going to probably kind of dig in a little bit and maybe give some perspective of why this might be good that they're in those trade rumor conversations, so to speak. Maybe because we more so want to see how vital a player this person can be to any of the potential suitors or potential places. Now, it may not be said that even some of the teams that we normally talk about, Shaw, that should be putting themselves in this conversation, doesn't mean for lack of trying that they don't want to get that player. But it could also very well mean they just don't have the assets that are attractive enough to whoever the suitors are, for that particular player to make a play.
Yeah, so I think it was a Rick Bucher article I was reading through, and it's just the way that it started I thought was so poignant because it's like a lot of teams are suffering from identity crisis. Like they think they are probably bigger and stronger contenders than they are because of the play-in tournament. So do you say, hey, you know what, let's go ahead and ride it out before we trade off or move anything around? Again, there's 10 seats, like 10 spots can get you, into the playoffs right now. So that identity crisis I think is a real situation for all these teams, and the parity is starting to really loom within the NBA, especially in the middle to bottom, if you will. And yeah, a lot of teams are just going to say, you know what, we're not sure. And I think it's going to cause for a very, very lucrative in terms of a pricey for the acquiring teams trade deadline, because people are going to continue to overvalue their assets because they're really not sure that they want to sell to begin with. So like you have to overwhelm them to get the guys that you may ultimately be thinking that can help your roster on the other side.
Absolutely. And I think one other thing too, Shaw, that's also important, and you brought this up a little bit. So I guess maybe I'll add a little seasoning on top of this is those teams that we often talk about where that identity crisis lies doesn't necessarily mean it's a question of getting a player to fill a void or need as much as it is getting a player that suits the organization's quote unquote priority. They may be attracted to that player in and of itself, but that player is of contrast to the style of play that a head coach may want to have in the system that he has. And it's not to say that you don't think that players and coaches are not on the same page. Very much the same thing with players in the organization. I mean, head coaches in the organization not being on the same page, because the head coach might be thinking, hey, I'll keep what I got because I know what I'm getting out of these guys, and we just need to get better. Whereas the organization says, what you have is not enough or not good enough. And I think you need to figure out a way to make this guy work for what you're currently doing. And that in and of itself lends to that identity crisis, because good organizations know that if the head coach is saying we need to get better at these things, the general manager and the whole basketball operations is fixated on getting the best optimal player for that, addressing that type of need. And that to me exposes a lot of that when you see some of the moves that are made during the trade deadline and where those guys fit in the roster and the rotations moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are great points, and like I said, it just goes on both sides of it. for the acquiring team or the team that might be trying to hold on one way or the other. So there's a bunch of names that are out there. I think when formatting this week's show, I kind of just laughed. I said, well, what happened? Like all of a sudden all this news about all this, and it was like a sudden a switch clicked. And then all these outlets were reporting, hey, this guy might be available and teams are now whatever. But I think it's now because you're going to start to see the true negotiations starting to take place. You're not going to get the team's best offer primarily until that final week or that final day of the trade deadline itself. But now it's like, all right, well, we know we got to start beginning the negotiation phases. So let me let you know that X player might be available, or we're taking calls on such and such and such and such, or here's what the asking price is going to be. I think that's where we're at right now. So that's what makes it such fun conversation here over this next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to definitely dig into some of these names that are being bantered about with the trade rumors. And then our segment for this week, who you got? You can get with this or you can get with that. It's been a trailblazer for us. It's been one of our signature segs. You know what I'm saying? So big up to my man Shaw again, dialing up another good one, which we'll get into a little bit later on in the show. But as always, let's do our plugs. Be sure to get my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Just put the baseline in, and then you can add us on so we can be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. If you want to check out this episode and all of our other previous episodes, and we've got quite a few. We got Shaw. We can actually say we have an extensive catalog.
It is quite the catalog of the library,
catalog, right? So if you want to check out the catalog of podcasts that we have dropped for your listening pleasure, be sure to go to www.baselinenba.com. And as always, you know that we run with the 19 Media Group. For those of you guys tuned in and see us locked on through YouTube, you can see the 19 Media Group logo. 19 Media Group, we run in these content streets. So be sure to check us and also the great content creators that are part of the family, whether it's music, entertainment, sports, culture, politics, you name it, we discuss it. This is a great group of guys passionate about what they know and what they want you to hear. So be sure to check out the great stuff that's happening with www.19mediagroup.com. All right, Shaw. So let's get right into it. Let's talk NBA trade rumors. And the first thing I think I want to kind of lend your perspective, and I think this may even help when we start throwing out some of the names real quick. If you had to pick of the top-ended teams, let's first start with the top-ended teams in the playoff conversation. Who do you feel like desperately needs to make a move during or by the trade deadline to give us any semblance that they are serious about wanting to contend, like they serious about wanting to make this run to a chip? Do we believe that what the Celtics have are enough? Do we believe that what the Grizzlies have are enough? What about the Pelicans, right? Are we steadfast about thinking the Warriors are going to suddenly, like, I just want to know the top-ended team that you feel like they cannot go through this trade deadline without making some kind of significant move.
So I think that's actually a very layered question for me because if you think about top ended, I'm going to go by who's sitting on top of these conferences currently right now. So that would not include Golden State. Obviously, they're still a threat and have a lot to say about what's going to be the determining factor in the Western Conference and ultimately the NBA championship, so to speak. But I think if there's one team who I feel like is going to make a move, I think Boston is. I don't know if they have to, but I think they probably want to just have a little bit more depth, maybe primarily in the front court. So whether that's at the stretch four position or even getting some more help behind Orford, who's obviously a little bit longer in the tooth, injury insurance behind, Robert Williams. So we can talk about the names that they've been discussing as well too. But I think it also now depends on how good and as we record, right? As we record, Sacramento is one of the top 3 teams in the Western Conference. So I think if you believe what they have is real, then I think they're probably going to have to make a move to solidify that. But I'd say maybe legitimate contenders, I think Milwaukee's probably in the place to probably obviously try to make a move for sure. I think they're not really confident in what's going on with Chris Middleton right now. They have a situation with Serge Ibaka that we can get into a little bit as well too. But I just feel like they want a little bit more, in general, because they feel like, Boston has done a lot to solidify their lineup in general, especially in the offseason. Brooklyn looks and seems to be very formidable as well too. So I think of all the truly top contenders that I say, hey, there's no question that they're a contender in the NBA this year. I think Milwaukee is probably the most solidified to actually make a move, and probably one that probably has to because of the Middleton situation.
Yeah, I like the perspective that you give with regards to the Milwaukee Bucks. I thought maybe you would lean more towards the Philadelphia 76ers. And it's not that it's because this team is not good. It's just that the other teams are just that much better. And I'm slowly beginning to wonder what versions of Harden and Embiid down the stretch are going to reflect what direction that the team is going to need to move to be able to be competitive in this Eastern Conference playoffs. I think this version of the Eastern Conference playoffs is going to be much different than we've seen in recent years.
Hmm.
Even though we almost see the same cast members, with the exception of where the Chicago Bulls are, because you now have the Cleveland Cavaliers were there last year, right? They were in the play-in. They've now entered in the chat. You know what I'm saying? The Miami Heat, they just become that steadfast team, and I think they're going to rest on their laurels to say, will our players be good enough to make the run? I know right now guys like Duncan Robinson are out there, but I've never seen Duncan Robinson be a difference maker. I just think that they're looking for anybody to fill in what they're paying so much money for, that they're just not getting that kind of production, or their team offensively is not set up where that kind of production is even needed for them, right?
Yeah. But hold on, I think that's a different conversation, right? So those like Miami's a middle of the pack team that has to make a move. So I think again, I don't consider Miami a contender right now. Like those middle of the pack teams, Miami, Dallas, even Golden State to a lesser degree, they all have to make a move. I think they for sure have to do something if they want to get into the upper echelon conversation. But if you're going with your original question, like, hey, who are the contenders right now? I think again, you're looking at obviously the top 2 and 3 teams in each of the conferences, and that obviously does not include Miami at this point too. So I think it's layered, but Miami definitely has to do something. Dallas definitely has to do something. Like Luka's, like you see the help wanted signs that people are putting out there on memes and stuff like that right now too. So there's a lot of people who have some things that they absolutely are going to need to do if they want to be competitive this
Right.
season.
Right. But I see, and I guess maybe that's the reason why I put this question out first, because your perspective of that is looking at the current state of the NBA standings. But can we not be truthful in this? If the Miami Heat are anywhere in striking distance of the playoffs, which doesn't look like that they're not, the Golden State Warriors are in striking distance of doesn't look like that they're not, they are going to be a legitimate threat. I think the question is, you have the players that the only way that they're going to get to where they're getting to is they just got to be better. They just got to play better. You already have the foundational players, right? You can question whether or not their depth is the way that it was, but as long as they're in the playoffs, this comes down to the runs that those teams make. And the Warriors and the Miami Heat always are in that mix. They're always in that conversation. So that's the reason why I kind of in a way disqualified or discredited them, because I think anything that they're doing is more tweaking. But I'm just talking about teams who, they're there. And we know even if they're there, we still can't take them serious enough to still see them playing in the Eastern Conference Finals or making a significantly deep run, because you still see the same prevalent problems that are reflective of what's been holding back this team, even from the beginning of this season. Like, I think we've questioned, whether or not this combination of Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, and James Harden really is going to help, catapult them to where we expected them to be over the last few years. And I'm saying, okay, fine. If you don't believe that that's going to be the case, you got to bring in somebody to help shore up and give us that confidence of thinking that the Sixers are for that real team. I don't ever really question about that with Milwaukee. You can honestly say now with Boston, you don't have to worry about them. But to your point, they'll probably make a move to deepen their team in some ways that they fear may be their, quote unquote Achilles heel to make this kind of run. I'm looking maybe even like a team like the Denver Nuggets, the Memphis Grizzlies. Do you think that those type of teams, because of where they are and what you've seen this team show you over the last few years in their playoff moves and their playoff run, they're going to need to put a little something get a little something out of this trade deadline to really be cemented on the idea that we think that they're going to be true representatives for the for the Western Conference Finals?
Yeah, so I think again, it's just it's how you think about the question. I think as it's posed, I don't feel like Milwaukee. Sorry, I don't feel like Memphis has to do something. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily feel like Boston has to do something. They could probably ride it out and still be very competitive and still be a title contender. I think Denver is extremely solidified because they did all their work in the preseason, in the offseason. Bruce Brown and KCP, all those guys just fit the role tremendously. So I'd be surprised if they did anything, major. Like everyone's going to look to tweak on the edges and do that, but I don't feel like those teams have to, right? So I think the have tos, if you want to talk about Philadelphia, is yeah, do you feel like they need and have to get insurance for Embiid? And at what cost does it? Because then do you have to give up Tobias Harris in essence to do that? I don't think Harrell has been everything that they hoped for or were expecting. But I guess he's been okay, and you just hope that Embiid continues to stay healthy. And it doesn't go unless both him and Harden are there anyway. So, again, I don't know where I put Philadelphia just yet if they have to make a move, because I think they also too feel like they did a lot in the offseason to prepare themselves for a run, with the exception of maybe of getting like that Embiid insurance.
All right. Coming up, Shaw and I are now going to dig into those trade rumors, man. We're gonna see some guys, man, taking their jerseys off and putting on new jerseys. No. We ain't talking Magic Mike stuff. We want them putting on new jerseys and new destinations. So we'll get into that and a little bit more here on the Baseline.
This awesome show that you are listening to is sponsored by Rich Kid Money Bear Clothing. The Bronx-based company represents 1990s streetwear with a modern twist. Rich Kid offers high-end quality clothing at reasonable prices. They have t-shirts, hoodies, sweatsuits, and more for men, women, and kids like me. You can check them out at richkidmoneybear.com and you can use the code 19media for a 15% discount. Okay, back to the show. And as always, this is a 19 Media Group presentation.
We're back. Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline Baseline NBA podcast. Couldn't get that one out of my mouth.
Been 10 years.
Yeah, I tell you, man. So now we're gonna get right into the trade rumors. We're gonna put some names to some faces and possible places, right? The Toronto Raptors, Shaw, are a very interesting team because you can make the argument that if they're patient, if Masai Ujiri is patient, they still have a very young and viable group of guys that you could continue to grow with, but there is some ringing concerns, right? So now I often thought that OG Anunoby probably should have been on the trading block quite a few times. We're now saying that the Raptors are now back up on Anunoby, and now guys like VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr., who they just had over the last few years, all of a sudden now have to be put onto the trading block.
Well, Anunoby, I think, will still be a person people inquire about. He was the object of many teams' desire over the course of the summer. He's had such a special season defensively that Toronto may be a little bit more reluctant to make that move now, but you could probably still throw his name into that hat. The VanVleet situation is more contract related than anything else. And, there's some teams out there who would love to have a veteran point guard, who does what he does offensively and is still, a pretty good guy
Hard to imagine we're
defensively.
calling him a veteran, though, right?
Say that again.
Hard to imagine we're calling him a veteran, like in that kind
Yeah.
of sense, right?
Yeah.
That's how his
And
time has flown.
I think he's a move that is probably too expensive for probably your top level contenders right now. So I don't know if there's a mid-tier team right now that would want to make a move. Would the Heat want to swap out Lowry and try to get VanVleet in there in some capacity in some sort of 3-team trade? Orlando.
Where does Miami go to go get their guards? They go to the northernest
north
team possible. Just like,
but I think Orlando's sniffed around VanVleet as well too, and you don't know what that would mean for a Cole Anthony or even Markelle Fultz specifically. So and they'd love to bring in a veteran presence to help with all that youth that is there, right? Terrence Ross is a veteran guy, but I just don't think I don't think he's that type of veteran. You know what I mean? That Orlando is looking to kind of keep around, and they're potentially trying to move him in.
Surprises me that Terrence Ross has not been
Yeah, he'll probably be moved as well too. So, but anyway, I think
it's a low radar move. You know what I'm saying? He'll be a low radar move in the sense that, you know, the contributions that you were getting from Terrence Ross maybe 3-4 years ago would have been significant. Now it's just like he's an added player, more of a cost saving move. You get something from him, great. You know, if you don't,
yeah, I mean, I think again, he's a hired gun.
yeah.
I'm sure he's fine in the locker room. He seems to be a very good teammate and all that. But I don't know if he's like the veteran presence, right? That maybe a VanVleet
just
would
feel like
be as a leader, so to
yeah,
speak.
yeah. To some teams, it's like I don't want to go into the G League and pull somebody and figure out whether or not this is going to be a work in progress. I got somebody that at least is tried and true. That if I got to really pull them off the bench because I'm not getting anything from these guys, and how coaching in the playoffs has a funny way of showing you how short a leash some players are with the coaches. It's not out of the sense that they don't like them. It's out of the sense that I can't afford for you to not be out there and give me what I need right now for what this team is going to be going through. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like it's a low risk move for anyone who's going to bring him on, because I don't think that they're going to be expecting him to make significant contributions unless the coach really, really wants this guy on here and they knows that what he's going to give them is in a way exactly what this team is sorely lacking for any kind of significant competitive run in the playoffs.
Yeah, but I mean, getting back to Toronto in general, like I said, they're a couple games under 500. Hasn't been the season that they wanted to. So VanVleet, Gary Trent, even Anunoby to a lesser degree, are probably going to be out there on the trade market. So I think Trent can obviously really help somebody as well too. Shoots the three ball extremely well. Plays relatively good defense, even though being a little bit undersized at that two guard position. And Toronto just has some decisions to make, and Ujiri and company will extract all the best that they can. I just don't know that they're guys, even those guys who I think are very, very helpful. I don't still know that top tier teams are going to be willing to pay a premium price, but mid tier teams may be looking to do that because they may feel like that's the piece that can get them over the hump.
All right, the Washington Wizards. This I don't know. Like, when is this going to happen? Are they just gun shy when it comes to the whole idea of just trading people? I mean, yes, I know they made the move to get Porzingis, but my God, like, the fact that we're still talking about Beal, the fact that we're still talking about Kuzma, the fact that and I get it. You talked me off of a ledge of me saying our man who always believes in blowing a team up. Like, I don't even know if it's necessarily a blow up. It's just a realization that, like, none of the components, none of the players, and this is what's always held back the Wizards, has worked. So what are we talking about with Kuzma and with Hachimura?
Yeah, I mean, Kuzma is a guy who they would probably get a pretty penny for. And so while he's really kind of made his hay as a Washington Wizard, his numbers have just been inflated tremendously. He's having one of his best seasons. I mean, probably even better than last year where he kind of had a breakout year. Kuzma has been a guy who can shoot the three. He rebounds. He's a pseudo efficient scorer, and really is somebody who you're not going to just bring in to come off your bench. Like, you're probably trying to plug him in as some sort of a starting four type piece. So to me, a team like Miami should probably be looking at this. Again, they've had some real issues at the four, starting guys like Caleb Martin and even Jimmy Butler in a pinch. If they were able to swing a Kuzma trade, I think that'd be huge for them. I don't know if Dallas will stiff around that too. Probably not enough defense along, with what they have going on. But again, I don't want to talk about continuing the same teams. The Hachimura thing was interesting because he's kind of an untapped talent. And I think, you get him on the kind of the end of his rookie scale here. Now you bring him in and feel like what you can do to develop him. So I think Washington definitely has some options with both of these guys and some others. I don't know if the Monty Morris thing has been what they wanted it to be, Will Barton, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know those names are as attractive as Kuzma and Hachimura are.
It's interesting. You threw the Sacramento Kings as a team that you would expect to try to make a play. I'm looking at Harrison Barnes' numbers. What wouldn't be attractive to the Sacramento Kings to bring in a guy like Kuzma, who clearly looks like he can play, like he loves playing out in LA, right? He's not a flash in the pan. He's a younger version of what they could potentially get as a great combination of Fox, Sabonis, and Kuzma. If you're the Sacramento Kings, why wouldn't you entertain the idea of that in moving Harrison Barnes, which I got to think, for the money that they've been giving Harrison Barnes, I know Harrison Barnes is a class guy, and this is nothing against Harrison Barnes. But I've not seen where having Harrison Barnes has made any relevant, significant upside to the Sacramento Kings, desire to really do things. This has all been the moves of bringing in Brown, the moves of moving of Halliburton, and clearly Fox and Sabonis have a better working relationship, right? I think it's one more move that still needs to be made, and I don't think it's going to hurt them, even if you believe that Sabonis, Fox, and Barnes are quote unquote that trifecta. They're not a good enough trifecta to get out of the West, but I think a young, blossoming team that Brown can work with a Kuzma, Fox, and Sabonis, that could definitely play.
Well, I'd only say this with one caveat. I think Barnes is just lower maintenance, and obviously he's gotten his bag, so he's not really complaining, and he's happy with the shots he gets. Remember, they drafted Keegan Murray as well. So I think, Barnes and Keegan Murray are probably lower profile guys who don't upset the apple cart in terms of the team chemistry. Kuzma's coming in there. Right? Kuzma's going to want to get his shots off. So then that ultimately affects your draft pick in Keegan Murray, short term and long term. Is it a more winning move now? Potentially, it's possible, but I think for the balance of their roster, it's a little bit of a question here because they do believe in what Keegan Murray can bring long term. And Kuzma, you're not bringing him here as a hired gun. You're looking to try to bring him in, extend him, and have him there for a while. And then you have some problems where the shots are going to come from if those guys are all kind of trying to get shots together.
The only thing that I worry about those two, Shaw, is the quote unquote the careful hands that they're putting on Keegan Murray. I would like to see more from Keegan, because I think the only way for you to really know the future of this team, if you believe that he is a part of that future, is he's got to get access to critical situations and game time playing situations, where if you're saying that Barnes, while he doesn't complain about getting those shots, he is getting those minutes still, and he's still a relevant part to that team. I think what would be interesting is, do you do a disservice by not inserting him and giving him that time? Kind of like the way that we questioned the Denver Nuggets and how they've handled Michael Porter Jr., albeit that the caveat to that has been Michael Porter's health, right? But I've seen where Malone has handled Porter with kid gloves. And now you're at this crossroad where you have the Denver Nuggets, who of the last couple of years have cemented themselves as being one of the top 3-4 teams in the Western Conference, but you can't speak with confidence that they have all of the pieces necessary to supplement what you're getting from Jokic to finally say this team is going to go to the NBA Finals. And I just wonder, when you got a team in ascension like that with the Kings, and you've got a guy you believe in Murray, how long before you start wondering, hey, are we holding him back because we're not giving him those opportunities to get in there and be in those clutch situations because we already got a veteran guy who doesn't make any waves? I'm not saying upset things, but I'm just saying that that's something that you probably look at when you're looking at the Kings, that they could be hurting themselves even if they don't take that chance to make those type of moves.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think with that, the unexpected success that they've had, they're pretty happy with that, right? So you would have to be very careful about how you interact or do anything to upset or change and alter that chemistry in any way, good or bad. Like, you just don't really know. It's going so well right now, and it's been so hard to get to this point. It's just like, all right, you kind of don't want to mess with it, and you're kind of happy being what it is. Like Sacramento, I don't think has delusions of grandeur. Like, hey, we're going to be a championship team this year, but they're the friggin' 3 seed right now, and that's just crazy after not making the playoffs for like 15
the other
years.
thing too is there's really only a 3.5 game gap separation between like 3 and all the way down to like,
for sure.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So I think if there's more distance, if you start seeing more separation and improved play, going on streaks, going on, significant runs by the time that the trade deadline, that could be something that triggers the Sacramento's front office for saying we got to, make another move here. All right, so let's go to some bigger names, Shaw. Let's go some high hanging fruit. Eric Gordon Hayward. These guys now are being bantered about. They've been bantered about for like, I don't know, 3 years now. Like, it feels like how long has Hayward been playing with the Hornets? 2 years, 3 years?
This is his 3rd year in Charlotte, I believe.
When are these dudes going to get moved? What's going on with this?
Well, I think Gordon it's just time. Houston's timeline is completely different where they're at right now. And he's been, a consummate pro, steady individual. A lot of teams look at Gordon and feel like, hey, off the bench scorer, okay defensively, but just really, really strong, physically. And they just feel like, hey, you know what? Why not us? It's interesting that Milwaukee's is kicking the tires on that too, because I'm just like, all right, well, I guess the Middleton situation is kind of what's scary for them. But I'm still thinking like, well, you still have Ingles, you still have Connaughton, you still have Grayson Allen, players like that. The Gordon situation is one where I'm not really sure how that's going to play itself out if they were to go there. But a lot of teams are interested in EG.
Can I speak to this? Can I speak to this real
Mhm.
quick, y'all? I think that the Milwaukee Bucks are still looking for a guy who can get who can still get his own basket. And Eric Gordon still has the savvy. He may not be as quick as he is in his previous, in recent years, but he still has the savvy to figure out a way to get his own shot. And it's one of the things that I see the Milwaukee Bucks struggle. Like, wow, if their ball movement is on point, great. But I've seen, well, my boy Joe Ingles, and I love Joe, but Joe looks like he's lost a step, right? And at times I've seen where like losing that step has caused to turnovers and has caused to, the ball not getting where it needs to be at a time where a good shot could be had for a team like the Milwaukee Bucks. So to your point, I'm just saying I can see why the Milwaukee Bucks might be looking at that, because you never can have enough guys who are going to figure out a way to get their own shot when the ball just doesn't seem to move the same way it does, like the way that they have their complete team typically does.
Yeah. It would be a good move for Milwaukee. Ultimately, I guess, again, obviously maybe Grayson Allen or Connaughton would be out the door, in a move for that in one way. And I think with Gordon Hayward, there are, I think, probably teams more probably in the Western Conference who'd like be looking at his potential services. I can't imagine the Eastern Conference team. The only one that I heard, and that was some months ago now too, I hate to keep bringing him up, but I live where I live, and so I hear a lot of their rumors is Gordon Hayward again going to Miami. They've shown some interest there, but I don't know if that's really alive now at this current stage. I think a Western Conference team would probably be more likely to try to make that move. But again, he makes a pretty big sum of money, so you got to match those salaries and figure out what the capital and compensation would ultimately be. But he's just somebody who I don't feel like is fitting in. And Charlotte is a team that I think should just really try to bottom out and get the Wembanyama sweepstakes if they possibly can.
Interesting. All right. So a couple of other teams here. The Golden State Warriors, you could probably see them, being sellers, not because they're giving anything away. It's just that they clearly have a player who, to some people, there could be an upside. It could be, a project in the weights, right? With James Wiseman. New York Knicks, Cam Reddish, another one. Like we've talked about these guys highly because of their athleticism and what they could potentially bring to the table. When you look at teams like the Knicks and you look at teams like the Warriors, they have supplanted themselves in this playoff conversation. They're going to ride with what they've got. To them, maybe it's probably better suited that they see what they can get for these type of players and see if there's a team willing to, figure out what to do with a guy like that, simply because they just seem out of place with the type of coaching and the system that those teams are currently running.
Well, I'll speak to Wiseman first. I think Golden State are buyers and sellers at the same time. Wiseman is just the person that can bring them probably back the biggest haul, and fit their timeline, which is right now and maybe next year as well. Like they know the window is closing. Draymond Green seems to think that he will not be back, after the season, no matter kind of what ends up happening. So
he said 15 years. He said 15 years. I'm giving myself, and he's like, I'm done. He's like, I'm gonna leave it to these little youngins.
Yeah.
So that's what he's telling himself now.
I just think the Wiseman experiment has not worked out. So there's the promise of what he is as a big man and being such a high draft pick. So they can get Bob Myers can probably extract blood from a rock here on a lot of teams and get a nice haul for them that helps them now and maybe even get some picks in the future. So I wouldn't put it past him in his ability to do that specifically. I think Cam Reddish is a name that I'd be the most surprised if he's not moved by the deadline. It's clear it didn't work out for New York. They can't wallow in this mistake that they made. And even if it is a mistake of their own doing or Reddish's doing, it doesn't matter. The relationship does not work. So he's a guy who I think has to move on at some point.
As I mentioned these two names, you see the possibilities of maybe the Knicks trying to see what they can get for Wiseman and maybe moving a Cam Reddish over to the Warriors with a couple of other players for that haul.
I mean, I guess it's not insane. I don't think Reddish gives Golden State exactly what they want, though. Because I think you're looking at Kuminga and Moody probably already in that vein. So I just don't know if they're just looking to acquire talent. I think they're looking to probably try to acquire a veteran piece, if you will, that can help them in the short term, like right now, in addition to maybe some draft capital. So I don't know if that would be kind of an apples to apples thing for situation. New York might be interested in Wiseman, and while Mitchell Robinson,
I would say this. Like, I know New York Knicks fans would not like this, so y'all can don't think that I'm trying to purposely wreck your team or nothing. But it would be interesting because with all that's been happening with Mitchell Robinson, and so he's definitely a certified starter, but he's also been very much injury prone. I think the Warriors have been very comfortable with Looney. I think, though, that they would love to have another guy, solid guy that could probably help rebound and also help provide that second unit defense that's sorely lacking to come in. Maybe if it's just for the short period of time for this playoff, for this championship run, if it's probably, for them to give up. And, look, the Knicks have been fine using Hartenstein, right? You got Wiseman in the wings waiting with Brunson and whatever's going to happen with Randle and Barrett and those guys. I don't think it's a complete fall off. You would think that would be something that they might look at and entertain as it pertains to what both of these teams are doing in the directions that they're going.
Yeah, you just have to see how Golden State would evaluate Reddish and whatever pieces New York would throw back. Wiseman would be the crown jewel here while he hasn't proven anything, but neither has Reddish. So you're just trading potential for potential, and two problems for each other. And you just don't know who would give in a situation like that. Too, was like, "Or is my problem bigger than yours?" So you need to give me more. And I think they would just be, kind of Spider-Man meme pointing at each other, waiting, what I mean, or like that, that Diddy meme from that, where he and the contestant are just kind of looking at each other in the stare off. I don't know that would go anywhere, but I think it is an interesting proposition. So if it does come to fruition on February 9th, I'll definitely give you props on that one for sure.
Oh, thank you. No conspiracy theory, guys. Trust me, you'll know when those come down.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Let's round this off, man, with a couple of rumors about the Jazz probably saying, "Hey, we're welcome to any of the rest of our roster, anyone but Markkanen and Kessler," which I find very interesting. Why only Markkanen and Kessler? And the reason why I say that is because, look, you just went through the trouble of signing Colin Sexton. You just went through the trouble of signing a couple of guys who were unless your intent is that you're trying to bring a marquee quality name, none of these guys are, but they're giving you a really solid season thus far. So, the fact that you're saying Markkanen and Kessler are non-tradable pieces, but everyone else is, I don't know, that reeks of what is that saying to the players that are already a part of this roster that has helped made Danny Ainge look like, what I'm saying? The damn Bob Myers of the Northwest Division.
Well, I mean, I think it's all context, right? So like we're pulling this from an aggregate from an article. I believe it was a Mark Stein piece, who says that, anybody named not Lauri Markkanen or Walker Kessler, they'd be interested to move. Markkanen is giving you roughly 26-9 right now. So I think that's hard to just hey, that's found money. Like they didn't know he's going to come here and be this good. So if you believe that's what it is, then you probably want to hold on to that. And if you're like, hey, you're going to get his best years, and hey, you can move him down the line if you really feel like it's not ultimately going to work. But why make that move now? Unless you just have to be bowled over with an offer. Kessler, they got in the Rudy Gobert deal. And he's been, especially lately, finding ways that he can really rebound and block shots, like such a defensive presence. They basically got their Gobert for a rookie scale contract. Again, I don't want to oversell it, right? He's not what prime Gobert was, but you can see the makings of what that can potentially look like down the line. So yeah, those are, for them, two cornerstone pieces that they've kind of walked into. Everybody else, Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Taylor Horton Tucker, all those guys are at this point kind of expendable, and Utah has kind of fallen back to the pack here now, no longer one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Like they're still hovering around 500 or just below. And you know what? Hey, they're starting to resemble who we thought they were going to be than, the hot start they came up with. So they're very competitive still, but it makes a lot of sense for them, I think, to kind of hold on to Markkanen and especially Kessler, and then see what else they can get and continue to build their roster from around those two centerpieces.
It has to be more about the draft picks than anything. I think Danny Ainge still fishing for picks, right? Because it can't be because you're looking for anybody that's viable through this trade deadline. Because you're trying to figure out how you can help them resurge themselves back into that conversation. And look, I think they'll be in the conversation. If they miss the playoffs, it's still not the worst thing in the world. I think that they've already overachieved. But I don't see this being where they're going to find their gem simply because now they're saying we're gonna make everybody else available for trade bait, which I've never found that to be good for any team. You know what I'm saying? That to me causes turmoil. Every player is basically looking over their shoulder, and while they're saying, "Hey, I'm playing for a spot to play for," play with Utah. They're also saying, "Hey, I'm playing to make sure I don't get traded somewhere where I'm living in obscurity and my best days of actually playing significant basketball, have now been outlined, for me flopping back around in the G League because I'm dealing with an organization that has no clue about what, quote unquote identity crisis." You know what I'm saying? So that to me is part of what I mean. Like listen, Danny Ainge has been notorious for this. We as Celtics fans have seen this over and over again with regards to, playing down the idea that certain guys have been bantered about in conversations and trade rumors and things of that nature. To me, the danger is when you basically make 3/4 or 90+% of your team available for trade bait. That doesn't help unless your intent is like, okay, you guys had a nice run. It's time to tank.
Yeah. I mean, again, but it's just what we thought they were going to be. So while the circumstances have changed, I say dramatically, again, as we record that, only a game under 500, they're in the play-in tournament, right? But what are they doing with Rudy Gay long term, right? Just these guys there's not a real yield for them for the long haul. So, right. If you move on for them, it also depends what you kind of get back, but if it's all just draft capital, so to speak, that's valuable. I think in today's market, and Danny Ainge is one of the masterminds when it comes to that. So I think while they've overachieved in a lot of ways, Will Hardy also knew what he was signing up for, and we'll see again. And they're not going to give. I don't think they're going to give people away. Right, I don't think they're going to give Clarkson away.
I don't think that's the case either. But I'm hoping that this is more about the gamesmanship, about Danny Ainge lighting a fire in his team's ass to play better, than the idea of saying everyone but 2 players on the roster is available for trade discussions. It's not even that we already don't know that Conley and Gay are up for or would be up for any kind of trade conversations. I think that's all that's a foregone conclusion. Even they know this. But when you outwardly say something like that, and usually it's
they didn't though. Remember, this is coming from an article. Danny Ainge would never come out and say everybody but Mark and Kessler are out there. So it's a report from a scout, if you will, or somebody on the roster.
There clearly was a source. There clearly was a source who gave that quote unquote the inclination. You see what I'm saying? And if I'm Danny Ainge, I'd be like, hey, you guys keep your mouths shut. You know what I'm saying? Let them speculate that. That to me is basic 101, but it shouldn't be a leaked source of anyone saying anyone but these 2 guys are available, because I think that in and of itself is what ruins the chemistry and the camaraderie that does happen inside that locker room. And unless the intent is that you're actually putting a message out there that everybody is, is up for grabs. And that's all that I'm just saying. Like, to me, we've seen Danny Ainge, though. He's played this game. So it wouldn't be foregone to think that that's not how he wants to see things. I'm just saying that, like, if it didn't come from him and it came from a source and they're writing about this, then obviously the rumblings in the room is all but these 2 players are available, you know what I'm saying, to be had. And I feel like that could be a dangerous play with the way that the Jazz came off already this part of the season. How you're ending it, I think, goes a long way in Danny Ainge's strategy moving forward, what he wants this team to look like for 2023-24.
Yeah, well said, bro. Well,
all right. Hey. Let's motivate ourselves now. We're going to take a quick break. It's time for that favorite segment, baby. My man, Shaw, a.k.a. Dr. Drez. And me, I'm sorry, no, you're Mr. Lounge. I'm Drez. Although I did get a haircut, so I'm not as scruffy as he tends. We'll do a Who You Got coming up here on the baseline. Time to break it down to the bone gristle. All right, Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast. Time to do a little Who You Got. And we made sure that we did not mention the selections for our Who You Got segment in the beginning, because I feel like it would just be giving away right now. I don't feel like getting all red hot chili pepper about this, but it is spicy. My man Shaw came up with a good one. You know what I'm saying? Always good when you bring it back. You got to come up with a good one, with a hot one to bring it back in. So who you got, Shaw? De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, or Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. Ah, this is a good one.
It's spicy for real. And as
Yes.
I was driving in the whip and thinking about show content and stuff like that too, and just
Was it
surveying the
convertible?
land.
Yeah, convertible top. Here we
No, 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 no. Very much, I mean, not like you know what I mean. I don't have Teslas or whatever the case may be. My dollars are very,
Tesla
very short.
convertible? I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
That's it.
we're neither one of us are balling
Elon
like
Musk has
NBA
been too
players.
busy. Has been too busy wreaking havoc in Twitter. I don't think him and his team has come up with anything conceptual like that, have they?
Nah,
Or maybe they
nah.
have.
But between these two, I just thought it was such a great question, especially timely now. Both teams are playing great basketball, in the playoff hunt. Ironically, four left-handed dudes, point guards and power forwards, as a pairing as well too. And I was like, wow, this really kind of matches up, almost like seamlessly. I've gone and started to look at some things here, and even in preparation of the show, like their win shares are stupid combined. I think it was the Kings duo of Sabonis and Fox have a 5.4 win share, and then the Knicks have a 5.2. But then Sabonis is heavily on the offensive side, where Brunson and Randle are actually kind of equal on either side of the basketball. And De'Aaron Fox is probably, by most people's account, he might be the worst of the four players that we're discussing here, and he's still very good enough for an all-star conversation. When you take the two of them together, though, there's one fundamental difference. If the Knicks duo can shoot the basketball primarily extremely well because of the ability for Randle to stretch out the three. Sabonis doesn't have that capability and doesn't really shoot the three ball in that manner. But what Sabonis does what he does do physically, especially with rebounding and passing the basketball, it really kind of elevates the Sacramento duo in its entirety. So you're looking at minutes played together. You're looking at their impact. The impact of Brunson and Randle is actually higher offensively, because what they do in terms of scoring collectively, both over 20 a game, and then averaging 13 plus assists or whatever it is, when they're not assisting to each other, their offensive impact on a game is roughly 72 points per game, where the Kings duo is roughly 60 something points per game. So in that alone, just the Knicks duo is just more offensively potent in general. All of that said, I still feel like I like Sabonis the best of the four players. And I think he impacts winning probably the most because of what he does as an interconnective tissue, running the offense for them. And that's not to take anything away against Julius Randle. It's just a matter of preference. So I think I will lean towards the Sacramento duo, but I couldn't fault anybody going with the Knicks duo, because they have been awesome and they are awesome. But I think that's what makes it such a great conversation.
Well, listen, man, kudos to Leon Rose. He found somebody, and I don't know if he did this, with the intent to say we need to find somebody for Julius Randle, right? I don't believe that that's what the idea was. I think that they just felt like Jalen Brunson, he's just that guy for us, right? I feel like he can potentially give us what we're looking for, what we need out of the point guard position. I think what's amazing to me is that for all of the times that we've seen Jalen Brunson, it's like we couldn't tell if he was more point guard or more shooting guard because of the way that the Dallas Mavericks, Jason Kidd was utilizing him. But maybe I should give kudos to Jason Kidd, you know what I'm saying, for showing him how he can evolve as being one of the more potent combo guards that are out there. He can play the two, and he can also lead a basketball team, which I think those intangibles are so significant in this day and age. I feel bad for De'Aaron Fox because I feel like part of that is that identity crisis that he has suffered from through the years since being drafted by the Sacramento Kings. But I think now that he has a solid player that he has confidence in playing next to with Domantas Sabonis, you're beginning to see what he really wants to be for that franchise, and specifically what he wants to be as a player in the NBA. I think that he's the type of person that wants to utilize what his skill set got him to this point in, and I think Brown sees that and is trying to situate that. So where it all to me really lies in is what are we getting from both Sabonis and what we're getting from Julius Randle. And look, man, Shaw, you've been a staunch critic of Julius Randle. Me guy, me guy, me guy. And I've always believed that somewhere along all of that hard work, and maybe there has been definite selfishness there and stuff like that, He's been a bulldog. He's been a bulldog. He's been a bulldog, and he's also taken the brunt of the New York media scrutiny a lot better than what's happened with Sabonis, who his path to greatness has been via through 3 or 4 different teams, and you keep wondering to yourself, like, my God, when is this all gonna like pan out? Like, he's a legit player, he's a legit star in this NBA, and he's remind you of his freaking dad. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I like the combination of the New York Knicks simply because if it not been for what we're seeing this year, this combination of Brunson and Randle, I would have easily taken Fox and Sabonis. Easily taken them. It is not to say that I don't think that Sabonis, to your point, isn't the better of all 4 players that we're talking about. But I do think that when it comes to Julius Randle and his versatility to what he can do, I think in some ways he's compromised some of the things that you naturally see from what Sabonis gives you. I think Julius Randle has kind of compromised those things, but in a way, it's elevated him to be in those MVP conversations. So he'll be a scorer, he'll be a rebounder, he'll shoot that 3, he'll be the point forward. These are the same things we kind of talk about with Domantas Sabonis. It's just interesting to me that until we do these type of comparisons, you'd be pressed to say Sabonis does it better than those guys, and he's all but 26 years old, where Julius Randle, who's a little longer in the tooth, so to speak, but still on the young side, has been giving this to us for years. It's now where he's doing it where it has relevance paired up with someone who plays alongside that kind of mentality. So from right now, for this iteration, I'm going to go with Randle and Brunson. But I'm going to tell you, any other guard being inserted into this conversation next to Randle, I would not take this pairing whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I know you would be hard pressed to. So I think for me, Fox is a little bit more erratic, and has had a less just kind of steady path to the success that we're even seeing him have now, and even over the last couple years to some degree. Obviously, with them moving on from Tyrese Halliburton last year or whatever the case may be, he feels more settled, and I think the pairing of him and Sabonis is proving to be a winning combination. But as is the Brunson and Randle combination, Randle bouncing back from what many people consider a subpar year last year after he was most improved, the season before that, he still put up numbers, right? It just didn't really seem efficient. He had all those issues, if you will. When you look at it again holistically, all the numbers together, the Knicks combination is actually outproduces the Kings combination some, but that's also because Randle and Brunson play more minutes together, and that's some of Tibbs' coaching. So those two average roughly 29, just call it 30 minutes a game together, whereas the combination of Fox and Sabonis are roughly at 23 minutes a game together, like sharing the court.
Right.
And that's because Sabonis commands the offense when Fox is out, where Brunson and Randle, again, Tibbs just plays his guys harder, in that regard. So again, we can only kind of go off of this year specifically, but those are some nuanced things that probably lend the stats to be a little bit higher than New York. But I cannot dispute the Knicks combo being better, just better overall shooters than what the Kings can ultimately do. And again, it's just a matter of preference. I just really, really, really like Sabonis a lot, and I don't think he probably even warrants while I may think he's the best player of the 4 guys, I don't think he warrants the difference here in essence to say, okay, well, he elevates it so much more from the Sacramento side. I still think it's very even. And either way, this could go. So that's why it's a who you got. And that's why our fans and listeners should get in on this one, because I'd love to see where it is. And while the New York faithful, especially on social media, are a lot more boisterous, I'm sure we'd probably get more feedback and saying like, this isn't crazy. It's not even close. But if you're really paying attention, it is a lot closer than you think, especially when you talk about how both of these deals impact winning specifically.
Absolutely. And one other thing I think I wanted to highlight as well too, when you look at this, when you look at the Knicks team, the insertion or the acquisition, let me say acquisition of Jalen Brunson has alleviated that responsibility of Julius Randle having to be the point forward, right? I just think that there's just a different mentality in his approach of how he wants to go about dominating the game. And, typically, they say it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Well, I don't completely subscribe to that when you've got guys that are as versatile as someone like a Julius Randle. And when I use that word versatility, I'm not comparing him to guys like LeBron James. That's not where I'm going with this, because everybody wants their version of a LeBron James. Everybody wants their version of a Kevin Durant. What we're talking about is when you got a big that handles the basketball and, can help navigate, that takes the pressure off of, getting your point guard being trapped, or someone as small as Jalen Brunson, who's just now working himself into figuring out how to get his teammates open and things of that nature. It allows him to ease himself into to still be able to work his way into the mix while still making sure that the rest of those guys get to eat. It's good to have that. But Tom Thibodeau relied on that way too damn much, especially last season. And it was to the detriment of Julius Randle's performance. It was to the detriment of the New York Knicks' offense, because that was not sustainable. It was never sustainable, right? Ever since Tibbs came into the picture, it was never going to be sustainable that he's going to get away with using Julius Randle as quote unquote the point forward guy just because they handed out a ton of money for him because he had a great season. That just didn't work. So the fact that they went 1 year too long trying to play that game of, musical chairs with their point guard situation, I think hurt a guy like Julius Randle. But you can clearly see when he's in his system, when he buys into playing with the guys that he can trust and work with, he will produce. And that's the reason why the Knicks have reinserted themselves back into this conversation about being a playoff contending team. Whereas with the Sacramento Kings, surprisingly enough, Shaw, it came down to the combination of players and the head coach who knows how to get what he can out of those young players. And that's probably why you're seeing the resurgence of Mike Brown as a viable head coach again in the NBA, because of what he did with the Golden State Warriors over the last few years. And then now what you're seeing, what he's always been able to do with young players who have certain skill sets that he can get them out and bring them all together, even if it's for a 3 or 5 year window run. I think we're going to see the best of Sabonis and Fox, as long as the organization figures out a way to keep them and keep building around them.
Yeah. So my final point on it will be this. The Kings combination, even plus minus together, roughly, 5 to 6 less minutes than the Brunson and Randall pairing. But the Kings combo is a +4, on the plus minus size, 4.2 to be exact. Whereas Randall and Brunson are a positive 0.4. So not even a full point. And that's with more minutes together on the court. Yeah. So to me, again, when it comes to the impact of winning and what it boils down to, some of it is team dynamic. And again, you have to think about strength of schedule and all those other things like that too, the pace and all that. But if you're just looking at kind of these numbers as they were in terms of the eye test, that's why I lean a little bit towards the Sacramento duo more than the Knicks one. But again, I think such a juicy and great conversation because it's very, very viable on the Knicks side, like extremely viable.
Absolutely. I will also say this though too, Shaw. So far this year, we've seen a few more, not by too much, but we've seen a few more dominant performances from both the combination of Brunson and Randle than we kind of have seen with Sabonis and with Fox. Now, that's not to say that Fox hasn't had his moments this year and that Sabonis hasn't had their moments, but I haven't seen where the both of them combined have gone in and literally put on a quote unquote show. We've seen over the last couple of weeks, especially when Brunson came off of his injury, when he's come back, that he's, gone in and dropped 35 and gone in and dropped 40. And just recently, MLK Day, I think, Randall dropped 46, you know what I'm saying? And almost had a 50 piece, right? So what I'm saying is that the potential for me seeing explosive games from Brunson and Randall seem more viable right now because Tibbs needs that with the roster that he's working with. Yeah. Then I will see probably this season from Brown. I feel like with Brown, it's more controlled, but the capabilities of that happening with Fox and Sabonis, I think is going to happen more if you start seeing the Kings, hanging around, being one of those top echelon teams. I think a lot of it is going to be about how explosive this team's scoring is going to be between those two dudes.
Yeah. Well, Sacramento's team it's more equipped to score efficiently, holistically, as a roster, where the Knicks have to really lean on Brunson and Randle tremendously. So Sabonis is not going to give you, 40, 50 points. He might give you 20, 25 rebounds, right. And even 15 assists, and Fox will chip in with 25 and 5 or 30 and 6 or something like that. Right. So Sabonis is just not going to produce in the same offensive way, scoring wise, as Randle. It's just not, they're just too different in that capacity. So, but yeah, as always, man, I'd love to hear what our fans listeners have to say about this. Thinking about all layers of this conversation, don't look at the scoring, because if it is, then it's really not that close. Brunson and Randle are both averaging 20 a game, where Fox is averaging 24 and Sabonis is at 18 and a half. So you're just oh my God, it's that. But if you think about basketball and not just putting the ball in the hoop, How are you impacting winning, making assists, making plays for others, rebounding the basketball, and win shares, et cetera, et cetera. All those things matter. And I think you'll find out it's a lot closer than maybe meets the eye.
Yeah. So I just want to make a last admission. This is why I don't like you right now, because I love Sabonis and I would hate and I love Randall too. You know what I'm saying? So it's like to have to choose between those two dudes. I mean, freaking Sabonis is a Swiss Army knife like you wouldn't believe, right? He's averaging like almost 13 rebounds still and almost 8 assists per game. I mean, damn. You know what I'm saying? Damn. But we knew this, right? Like, this is what we kept saying when it was OKC and he was in Indiana. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you people, right? Like, figure out a way. This guy should be on the center stage right now and to go to conversations of one of the elite force in the game right now, right? But he's like, don't worry. He's like, I'll make it happen. He's like, you put me in a place where I got a beam, you know what I'm saying? Light up the beam in Sacramento. He's like, I'm going to light some shit. I'm going to light some ish up right now. He's like, you mess around and see what I'm going to do with this team. So, yeah, great show all together. And once again, we definitely want to hear from you guys. Be sure to get at us at NBA Baseline and let us know your thoughts. Who would you select? Would you select De'Aaron Fox or Sabonis, or would you go with Jalen Brunson or Julius Randle? Once again, for the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hopping on board with us this week.